early on, about the time I was 12, 13, going from 6th grade into junior high. I'm sure my mom had had 2 weeks of summer vacation of me saying, I'm so bored, to tell me, well, you're going to junior high now, which means you can wear pantyhose now, which means if you sew your clothes, I'll keep you in fabric. So she did. And did you remember when JCPenney's had fabric? You would go up the escalator and there would be the fabric department and it would be these big bins with bolts and we would dig through the remnants and things like that and find pieces that were big enough. And at this time, I loved the peasant style blouses. This was probably about 1974, 1975. I still like them, yes, exactly. But we would go through those remnants and say, okay, this is big enough for the sleeves, and look, we can do the bodice out of this, and we can do, you know, the flared part out of this, and so we were combining fabrics and colors and things like that, and I love fabric. I love mixing things together. Farther on, through junior high and high school, I took every home ec class I could handle. And when it came to my senior year of high school, I had 1 semester left, all the credits that I needed to graduate and move on, and I just wanted that easy A so I could coast. And I took an advanced home ec class. Do I have any home ec teachers in here? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because of home ec teachers, this is also why I'm doing what I'm doing. She had us take a piece of graph paper and draft an Ohio star block, which seems pretty, for those of us who've been quilting for quite a while, you know, we recognize that right off the bat. We know it's a 9-patch variation. We know it has 5 squares and 4 quarter square triangle units, and we can do the formula in our head like this. But for a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds, this was a tough thing. We drafted this out, we cut out our paper shapes on the line, we mounted them to sandpaper. Remember this? If you've been quilting this long, they're nodding their heads. Yes, you remember this. Trace it on your fabric, add your seam allowance. Cut it out with scissors. There were no rotary cutters. No nifty tools, no AccuCut Go, none of these things. And we sewed these poor little wonky blocks, and I'm sure all the points were chopped off, and we were being graded on these things, and we picked them apart and sewed it back together and layered it with our lovely, thick 1980s polyester batting. Lovely. It was so thick you could lose your quilting needle. If you have not moved in 5 years, you have no idea how much fabric you have. It's heavy. Let me tell you. We moved, first of all, we moved from Idaho to Texas. I spent a year in Sulphur Springs. My husband worked for an ice cream manufacturer out in Sulphur Springs. And I have a very big fondness in my heart for Texas. It's the first place I ever learned that pimento cheese sandwiches only come on white Wonder Bread with the crust trimmed off. And I learned things that like, y'all is singular and all y'all is plural. And I met a wonderful group of ladies who just took me in, and we quilted and we quilted and we quilted and we quilted some more. And then I moved to Waxahachie. And I was in Waxahachie for 2.5 years, and I was there until 2003 when the big moving van came, and more than half of the moving van said quilt room on it. And we moved to Columbia, South Carolina. We stayed in Columbia, South Carolina for 5 years. Now, when we moved from Columbia, South Carolina to North Carolina, where we are now, my son got his own house, and he said, well, can I have the family room furniture? Sure. Can I have the old big screen TV? Sure. Can I have the dining room set? Sure. Okay, so all that's going on the moving van is the bedroom furniture, and 95% of the space was taken up by boxes that said quilt room. Everything was quilt room. This is how much fabric we have. We are blessed with so much overabundance. I would love to hang the person who said, she who dies with the most fabric wins, from the nearest tree by her feet. Because at some point we have to start sewing. We have to stop shopping and make the scale go the other way. I want a show of hands if you have this sitting on, near, or around your cutting table. Come on, be honest with me. And you know what? These pieces are valuable. You know, what's not to like about a strip of blue with little tan stars? You know, I can use this. Whatever it was, something got cut sideways on it too, but just because it's a small scrap, does it lose its value? If this was $9.99 at the quilt shop, it's still $9.99 as a scrap. Just because it's smaller, it doesn't lose its value. So we've got a lot of money wrapped up in our scraps. And as long as we can stuff it into the bag and not have to look at it, it doesn't bother us. But what happens when we fill up one bag? We start another bag. For 15 minutes, I cut. And this is what I cut. Plain and simple log cabin. I made 2 containers because I had a light side and a colored side. And I like to call these my neutrals and my colors because that's what I was using. So 1.5 neutrals, which are my whites, creams, beiges, and tans, went into one bucket. And all of the colors, all of the other colors of the rainbow, went to the colored side in their own container. And you know what happened after about 2 weeks of cutting? I had enough 1.5 strips for 3 or 4 big quilts. This is how fast it is. And I learned something, because we should learn something from every project that we do. That's why we offer you workshops, so that you can learn something and expand your playground. I learned that I liked to sit and sew better than I liked to press and cut. I would rather spend my time at the machine. So what I did was find other things that can use the same size strip. I made 4 patches and 9 patches and half log cabins. You can piece checkerboards for trees or your border. I also like blocks and units that finish on the inch or the ½ inch. I'm really happy if you don't make me sew something that has to finish at 7/16. Keep it simple. ½ inch, full inch. We can make the math work for that. So I moved up to 2-inch strips because that's the next increment. And because I liked separating them this way so much for the log cabin, I did the same thing with the 2-inch strips. I had 1 container for the colors, that's all the crayons in the box, and 1 container for the neutrals. I don't do light, medium, and dark. Those mediums, they can kind of go either way and they make things really, really confusing. But if I sorted it by neutral and color, it was easy for my brain to figure out. It's time to go to the ironing board to press. We grab a little folded over scrap and we sew on and off of that. And we cut from behind and we go press and we come back and we sew some more and we grab that same old thread rat and we shove it through again and we cover it with thread. We use it again and again and again and again. When that little scrap is full of thread, what happens to it? Gone. Gone. Now think with me here. I have boxes of pre-cut squares and shapes. For this quilt, I set my box of 1.5 squares next to my machine, and while I am chain piecing on project A that I'm really, really hot for, and it's time to go press, I grabbed 2 squares, right sides together, sewed them with my regular 1/4-inch seam, snip from behind the presser foot, go press, come back, sew some more, add a 3rd one on. I was building a checkerboard, so I have 2 units going here. I have one that's light, dark, light, and one that's dark, light, dark. I built the checkerboards for these trees all in between the lines of chain piecing other things. No thread waste, no thread rats. Build a free quilt in between other things. It's all good, right? You can do this, and this is what Adventures with Leaders and Enders is about. Have you ever given up on putting a beautiful pieced border on a quilt simply because you were so tired of it you just wanted to slap something on there and be done? You don't have to do that anymore. Cut your border pieces first. Set those by the machine. While you are sewing on the blocks for the center and it's time to go press, sew 2 border units together, just 2. Come back and sew some more. Sew 2 more border pieces. That border will finish itself while you're working on the center, and it will never feel like, oh my gosh, I still got to work on this thing, it'll never be done. You will get it done. How many of you have a UFO that has been completely cut out, sitting on a shelf, untouched, for 3 years or more? Look at all the hands. Okay, this is my challenge for you today. All you're going to do is get that down from the shelf. put it by your machine.